Okay, sounds great. Thank you. And with that, seeing as we're 10 on Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021, I'll go ahead and call to order this meeting of the MAG Population Technical Advisory Committee, also known as PopTAC. I'm the chair, Andrew Ching from City of Tempe. Scott, if you want to go ahead and call the roll now, then we'll start with item 2.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Tracy Clark from ADOT.
Yes, here.
Sydney Urias or anybody else from Apache Junction. Michelle Samerdla from Avondale.
Here.
Andrea Marquez Buckeye.
Present.
Stacy Bridge Denzak Carefree.
I'm here.
Luke Kautzman or anyone else from Cave Creek. Sam Andrea from Chandler.
I'm here.
Jose Macias El Mirage.
Here, present.
I think I saw Victor Cantu from Florence. Maybe he dropped off. Farhad Tavasoli, Fountain Hills. I do see Victor and Farhad listed, so maybe we can come back to them. Anybody from Gila Bend? Kyle Muris or anyone else from Gilbert?
Yes, Scott, I'm here. It's Kyle.
Okay. Alex Lerma or anyone from Glendale? Christian Williams or anyone from Goodyear? Anyone from Guadalupe? Sonny Colbreth or anyone from Litchfield Park? I saw Rudy Lopez from Maricopa.
Yes, here, present.
And now I am actually seeing a living, breathing Farhad Tavasoli. Are you here? He's nodding his head. Matt Holm or anyone from Maricopa County?
Yes, Ray Banker here. Thank you.
Hi, Ray. Wahid Alam or anyone from Mesa? Paul Michaud or from Paradise Valley, I think I saw.
Yes, present.
And I saw Jennifer from Peoria.
Yes.
Anybody from Phoenix? Any Millers from Phoenix? Or anybody else? Dave or Adam? No, okay. Tara Harmon, Pinal County, I believe I see.
Yes, present.
Sarah Clark, Queen Creek.
Here.
Brian Myers or anyone from Salt River. Okay, I see a picture of Taylor and a young boy.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello. Joshua Mike from Surprise.
Here.
And Ben Davidson from Valley Metro.
I'm here.
Davis Konauer from Wickenburg.
Here.
Gregory Arrington, Youngtown. And then I'm going to give Victor Cantu another chance. You here, Victor?
Here.
All right, Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum. Is there anybody else that I didn't name besides MAG staff?
Zach Wardine with City of Chandler.
Isaac? Okay. That, yes, Mr. Chair, we do in fact have a quorum.
All right, very good. Thank you. We'll now move on to item number 2 on our agenda, call to the audience. An opportunity will be provided to members of the public to address the MAG PopTAC on items not scheduled on the agenda that fall under the jurisdiction of MAG, or on items on the agenda for discussion, but not for action. Members of the public will be requested to limit their comments to 3 minutes. A total of 15 minutes will be provided for this agenda item. Unless the chair of PopTac provides for an exception to this limit, those wishing to comment on agenda items will be given an opportunity at the time the item is heard. Do we have any members of the audience who would like to speak to PopTac at this time?
We do not.
Okay, very good. We will now move on to item number 3, which is approval of the meeting minutes of October 27th, 2020. The requested action would be a motion to approve the October 27th, 2020 meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll move to approve. It's Kyle and Gilbert.
Thank you very much. Do we have a second to that motion?
This is Paul in Paradise Valley. I'll second.
Very good.
And Mr. Chair, we do need to do a roll call vote for this.
Okay, very good.
Tracy Clark, ADOT.
Aye.
Patty Junction. Michelle Avondale.
Aye.
Andrea Buckeye.
Aye.
Stacy Carefree.
Aye.
Cave Creek. Sam Chandler.
Aye.
Jose El Mirage.
Aye.
Victor Florence.
Aye.
Farhad Fountain Hills. Can't hear you, Farhad. You can give me a thumbs up. Oh, okay. He's giving me a thumbs up for an aye. Where was I? Gila Bend. Kyle from Gilbert.
Aye.
Glendale. Goodyear. Guadalupe. Litchfield Park. Rudy Maricopa.
Aye.
Ray Maricopa County.
Aye.
Mesa. Paul Paradise Valley.
Aye.
Jennifer Peoria.
Aye.
Phoenix.
Aye.
Oh, hi, Dave.
Aye.
Tara, Pinal County.
Aye.
Sarah, Queen Creek.
Aye.
Salt River, Pima, Maricopa Indian Community. Taylor, Scottsdale.
Aye.
Joshua, Surprise.
Aye.
Ben, Valley Metro.
Aye.
Davis, Wickenburg.
Aye.
Youngtown. And Chair Andrew Ching.
So vote aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item number 4, homelessness asset map tool and eviction trends for Maricopa County. This is an item for information discussion only.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself, but can you all see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. My name is Maggie Wong. I'm a research analyst here at MAG in the Regional Analytics Division. So I'm going to get started with a demo of this homelessness asset map. So this is an interactive mapping tool that we've developed in partnership with Crisis Response Network, 211 Arizona, and the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care. The data comes directly from the 211 Arizona resource directory. So they provided us with a list of services that specifically target or frequently serve populations experiencing homelessness. And then also we have data from the housing inventory count. So that's a report that's submitted annually to HUD, listing all shelter and housing programs. So all of these services and programs are mapped here, except for any confidential locations, such as most domestic violence shelters. And the purpose is really just to visualize spatially where services and programs are located across the Maricopa County region for better regional planning and coordination around homelessness. So in phase 1 of this tool, it's not meant to be used as a housing resource for clients. It's really mainly meant for the planning side of things to assist practitioners, service providers, city and town planners, and stakeholders in collaborative planning and policy development. So it may end up having a password and being password protected from the public, at least for immediate use, until adjustments are made to make it go completely public. And part of this comes from a concern from providers that clients need to have very specific messaging to walk through how to access housing and services, since our region has a coordinated entry system and prioritization process, rather than simply showing up to a housing program office. And then before I jump into this, I also want to note that this is still a work in progress. We're currently reviewing and incorporating feedback. It's in a draft mode right now to get stakeholder input on the data, making sure these locations and information are accurate. And even this layout may change in the future. We really set it up to be easy for someone to go through and kind of just check through the program information. So I'll start the demo now. So when you first open up this website, you just get a welcome screen that takes you through a very quick tutorial of the different parts of the interactive map, just so that users know where they can access things. I'll start with this about section. Basically just gives you that background and details on the data sources that I introduced you all to at the beginning, along with contact information on CRN and 211 and MAG if anyone has questions and feedback. But yeah, so you'll see that this default view is just Maricopa County with all of the locations and services here listed by icons. And the legend here on the right shows the total number of programs and services overall, but then also in each of these general categories, which include shelter, housing, food, meals, healthcare, clothing and hygiene, other services, and ancillary services. And they also have little hover buttons so you can see the specific program types within each of these. So for example, emergency shelter, transitional housing, those are under the shelter category. You can also toggle off and on these different categories. So say you just wanted to look at shelter and housing, that'll turn off all the other categories, so you're only looking at these specific programs. You'll see also at the top, we've got filters, so you can filter by a specific program type. So this is for things like if you only wanted to see emergency shelters or only wanted to see homeless courts. We've got a city and town filter and then also a provider filter. And again, these are really meant for the review process to make it easier for different staff to look at their programs in their different locations. So just for an example of what the information on here looks like, if you zoom in and you can click on any of these icons, you'll see this little pop-up with the different information we have. So we have just the name of the program and provider, we have the address, housing type, and then we also have bed and unit data that comes from the housing inventory count that I mentioned earlier. But then for the 211 records we received, we have some more details on hours, a description, eligibility, and such. So you'll notice that one location can have multiple services and programs. So for example, this location I clicked on is the Human Services Campus in downtown Phoenix. So you can see that they've got quite a variety of programs available here and you can click through and look at. And then finally, I'll just highlight that you can see we've got these blue buttons, again, specifically for this review process, so that users can provide feedback on information that we already have if it needs to be changed, or they can add a missing program that we need to add to the map. So in the past 2 weeks, we've received quite a few comments, edits, and suggestions. So we're looking into those, we'll be incorporating those. But we're going to look to add some more features in phase 2 of this tool, and that's where we'd love to hear your input if you have any. So some features we're looking to add are some background layers that users could toggle on and off, including things like seeing where we're encountering more folks experiencing homelessness. Are there areas that could use more targeted services and programs? The data from that would probably come from our annual point in time homeless count, kind of looking at the hotspots of where we were seeing people each year. We also have data from outreach workers who go to the streets to meet folks for services and for scheduled meetings. So we've got weekly data on that we could map on here as well to kind of just look at where the need is in the region of where people experiencing homelessness frequent. We're also looking to bring in contextual layers such as demographics. So using census data, we could bring in poverty, education, vulnerability, but we're really open to any feedback. We also, since we have a partnership with 211, they've provided us with some call data. That's something that we could also map by zip code to see where folks are seeking services and what type of services they're seeking. So ultimately, we really want this to be a useful tool The main focus right now is for planning purposes, but down the line, there's definitely a lot of potential for this to be used among outreach workers and even to be a client-facing tool for people who are searching for services themselves. So we're looking forward to reviewing the feedback, developing this more. Like I mentioned before, the look and feel may change. We may be able to add reporting functions as well that kind of provide summaries of different areas. So yeah, we're just collecting feedback and are definitely open to any suggestions you all may have. I'm going to switch gears now and talk a little bit about some eviction trends in the region. So we've been receiving monthly evictions data from the Maricopa County Justice Courts, and so we have some initial analysis to share with you all today. So first, we'll start with a quick look at evictions data since the beginning of last year. So when comparing February of 2020 to February of 2021, there's been a 44% decrease in eviction cases filed. You can see that significant decrease in March, April, and May, likely due to that eviction moratorium that was set in place at the beginning of the pandemic. But eviction filings did start to rise toward the end of the year with a high in December of over 4,000 evictions. And just for reference, prior to the pandemic, monthly evictions were generally around 6,000 filings per month. And you'll see that in the last 2 months, in January and February, we're just around 3,000. So we're still down from what the numbers were like prior to the pandemic. So while the eviction data itself is limited on demographics, what we did is that we paired it with census data, specifically from the American Community Survey, so that we can start to estimate based on block groups. So this allows us to have some additional analysis on demographic characteristics in the areas these evictions are taking place. So right here, we're looking at, we found that 60% of 2020 eviction filings were in areas with high minority population. So this map of Maricopa County is showing evictions as dots, and evictions that are in block groups with a minority population of over 50% are in that bright turquoise color. The other gray dots represent all other evictions from 2020. We actually looked at eviction filings since 2019, and the proportion of evictions in higher minority areas has been consistently over 60% for the past few years, even after the drop in cases from the moratorium. So although there have been fewer eviction cases filed in the past year, the percentage in higher minority areas has remained pretty consistent. We also see that 79% of evictions in 2020 were in lower income areas, and we defined this as block groups where the median household income is under $65,000. So the bright magenta dots on this map show evictions in these lower income areas, with the gray dots showing all other evictions. The following chart shows a more detailed distribution of the evictions by household income range. So in the purple, you can see that's the 70% in those lower income areas. But now you can really see that the majority are in block groups that have a median household income of $25,000 to $45,000. And finally, we also see that 62% of evictions in 2020 were in areas with higher poverty, block groups where over 15% of the population is below poverty. So evictions in these higher poverty areas are mapped as those blue dots on the map. And again, all gray dots show the other 2020 evictions. Now, aside from the Justice Court's data, there is also data related to evictions coming from the Household Pulse Survey put out by the US Census Bureau. This survey samples responses on household experiences during the coronavirus pandemic, including housing challenges. And here we're looking at the most recent data for February 17th through March 1st of this year. So for the Phoenix metro area, 24% of survey respondents reported that they are not confident in their ability to pay next month's rent. And you can compare that to, for Arizona, it's 22% of respondents. And then overall in the US, 27% of survey respondents reported that they are not confident in their ability to pay next month's rent. So in the Phoenix metro area, that's 12% saying they have no confidence at all, and 12% saying that they only have slight confidence. Another question asked is, for respondents who are not current on rent, what is the likelihood of eviction in the next 2 months? So over 59% of survey respondents in the Phoenix metro area reported a likelihood of eviction, 28% saying that it was very likely, and 31% saying that it's somewhat likely. So in Arizona, 59% of respondents reported the likelihood of eviction, and in the US, that's 48% reporting a likelihood We do want to mention that this percentage is down from the end of last year. Back at the beginning of November, 70% of respondents in the Phoenix metro area reported a likelihood of eviction. So from the household pulse survey, we've mainly been tracking these two data tables related to evictions, but there are a lot of other questions related to education, employment, food security, health, and more. So that wraps up this summary of eviction trends in the region. We're also continuing to look into different types of analysis using the evictions data along with data on homelessness in the region, maybe even incorporating this evictions data onto that interactive mapping tool I showed at the beginning. But we look forward to sharing more in the future and also look forward to hearing any feedback you may have. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'll open it up for questions just a minute, but I had one regarding the evictions data, the mapping you showed. What I wasn't clear on was, if there's a moratorium on actually evicting people, I'm assuming that means that landlords can still go to court, prove that there is something that occurred that would require an eviction, get the order, and then just not be able to execute that order for a period of time if there's a moratorium. Does that data reflect actual individuals being forced to exit or to vacate their residences, or does it show the number of evictions that have been granted by courts and there's a moratorium on actually executing those evictions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what you said is right. So the moratorium is blocking the actual force, the enforcement of it. But so
Okay.
the data we're looking at here is eviction case filings.
Got it.
They did add
Okay.
a new field to the data, kind of talking about the next steps after the case filing, including like judgment and such. So that's something we still need to look more into.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I figured, which I assume means that unless those individuals get current with their rent between now and whenever the moratorium ends, that there's a potential for a significant number of forcible entry and detainers or evictions that are going to be all over the metropolitan area. Seems like it, at least. Right. In addition to any new filings. So, okay. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Really good presentation. Are there any questions from any members of the committee? Go ahead and get my attention if there are. Okay, seeing none, we will close that presentation. Thank you so much. Now, that was an item, again, like I said before, for information discussion, not an action item. We will now move on to agenda item number 5, census update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a few updates. I think maybe most of you are aware of the stuff, but I just wanted to bring this up in case anybody was not aware. I guess the big one is when we're going to get Census 2020 data. As you know, the state counts should have been delivered and made public by the end of last calendar year, and the redistricting data should be available by April 1st, but everything has been delayed for a number of reasons. The latest we've heard from the Census Bureau is that the state counts will be available by the end of April, and the redistricting data will be available by the end of September. This redistricting data will be the housing unit and population counts for census blocks, block groups, tracts, cities, towns, counties, CDPs, and Native nations, among other geographies. And then all of the other detailed stuff will come later, and they've not provided a timeline on that. But end of September is when we expect to get the actual block data that can be used for redistricting and a number of other things. There are a couple of statistical criteria changes that the Census Bureau is proposing that have been put in the Federal Register recently. The first one is urban areas. After the decennial census, the Census Bureau has designated areas across the country as either urban or rural. And I actually have, they're proposing some changes to the criteria for how they designate those urban areas. Most of the changes are not that significant. In the past, they've used population density. This new change, they want to use housing counts because throughout the decade, they are maintaining, they get permit data, they get completions data, and they say that this change using units rather than population will allow them to update urban areas throughout the decade rather than after a decennial census. The change from population to units using a standard or a typical persons per household isn't going to change where places are designated as urban. It'll just allow them again to be able to use a different metric, which will allow them to update it more frequently. Probably the big change that'll affect this region is if there are adjacent urban areas that those urban areas will possibly be combined. We've put together a map showing some estimates of what we expect, and I'm gonna try to share that with you shortly. There's my share screen. There it is. Are you seeing the map now? Hopefully, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So currently, the Phoenix, the large one here on the right is the Phoenix urban area, and then on the left is the Avondale-Goodyear urban area. And at one point, there was kind of a gap of undeveloped land between the two, and which is why the two urban areas were designated separately. The new criteria includes some commuting data, and in a nutshell, if at least 50% of the workers or the residents in the smaller urban area commute to the larger urban area for work, those two urban areas are going to be combined. And we've looked at the data. I think just anecdotally, I think it's probably not a huge surprise that at least half of the people who live in the Avondale-Goodyear urban area commute to the Phoenix urban area for work. And so we expect these two to be combined. And so that's the big brown area. Another change is in the past, in addition to urban areas, they've had what they call urban clusters. And these urban clusters are circled in the blue. Wickenburg is one of them, Festival, Vistancia, Buckeye, Estrella, Maricopa, and Florence. They're getting rid of the urban cluster designation. And one of the reasons is it just kind of arbitrary. There's no reason for there to be the two differences. And so now anything that qualifies under the new criteria will be an urban area. Anything that doesn't will not be. The big question is the former urban clusters. Which ones of those are going to remain separate urban areas, and which ones are going to join the larger agglomeration? From what it looks like, the Buckeye urban cluster will likely become or possibly become part of the larger urban area. Maybe Vistancia, there's a little bit that's close enough, but it looks like the rest of them are far enough away from the urban area, the larger urban area, that they're going to remain separate urban areas. And again, no more urban clusters. From the Census Bureau's perspective, this is just a statistical measure. Is how much of the country is urban, how much of the country is rural. There are some other federal programs that use these designations for certain things. I don't know enough about those to tell you what the ramifications are of these changing. But if you're concerned about that, let me know, and we can try to do some research to find out how that might affect your area if this happens. I guess I should point out the last thing on this map. These red little dots, these are areas that we think qualify under the new criteria that will be part of one of the urban areas. So expanding just a little bit on the fringes. The comment period for that Federal Register is due on May 20th. So if you have comments, you can provide those directly to the Census Bureau through the Federal Register. If you have questions about that, as always, please let me know, and we can try to help you with that. The last one that I wanted to mention is another Federal Register notice that the Census Bureau put on their on the Federal Register. This comment period has passed, and there are a lot of comments, especially from Arizona, but from across the country. This one would change the threshold for what qualifies as a metropolitan planning or metropolitan statistical area. In the past, that population threshold was 50,000, and the Census Bureau is proposing changing that to 100,000. What that means for the MAG region, nothing. We're well over 100,000. What that means for the rest of the state, there are currently 7 metropolitan statistical areas, and only 3 of those are over 100,000 population, or expect to be after the decennial census. What that would mean is that Flagstaff, Lake Havasu Kingman, Prescott Valley Prescott, and Sierra Vista Douglas would all lose their metropolitan statistical area status, and they would be designated as micropolitan statistical areas. And those areas have all commented on that. I can send you the link if you're interested in reading the comments that were posted to the Federal Register. But that would be the result of those changes if they get approved as is. We'll keep you updated on those 2 things. And if we hear anything else about when census data will be released for the 2020 census, we will let you know that as well. I'm available to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions?
I do. Scott, Rudy, City of Maricopa. I guess I'd like to follow up with you offline to see how the urban cluster designation for City of Maricopa may be affected, especially for funding sources.
Yeah, definitely. I can help you with that. What I can tell you right now is that Maricopa, it looks like, will qualify as an urban area.
Right.
And like I said, it's going to be an urban area or it's a rural area. There's no more urban clusters. So I guess you're graduating.
Nice.
But we can talk more, and I can tell you more if I know it.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay. Seeing and hearing no other questions, thank you, Scott, for the update. And we will now move on to agenda item number 6, Planning Director Outreach. This is Scott again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Over the past couple of weeks, I've talked to a number of planning directors across the region of the bigger member agencies about the pandemic and what kinds of things we need to take into account when we're looking at our next generation of long-range projections. And so we wanted to bring this to the agenda to, number one, to let you know why we're talking to your bosses without you, but also you guys are mostly planners, and you talk to the development community and you see what's going on out there in the real world. MAG staff, we've been in our houses for more than a year, and a lot of you I can see are in your offices or in the office, and we just wanted to get a sense if you're seeing any trends in development or land use, if you're getting a sense of what we might expect as far as employment, especially in office use or people working from home, we do these projections, these long range projections every 3 or 4 years. The next set will be adopted we expect the next official set will be adopted in June of 2023. But we wanted to get kind of a start now, and we'll be having this conversation over the next couple of years as we learn more and more about what's going to happen in the new normal. But at this point, I just wanted to open up and if anybody has anything they can share about what you're seeing out there in the development community, land use changes, general plan requests, anything like that you think we need to take into account for our long range model, so that it's reflects reality, or as close to reality as projections can be. So I'll open it up, and anybody has any comments, let me know. And if you want to email me or call me later on afterward and we can talk one-on-one, that'd be fine too.
Thank you, Scott.
It looks like Joshua is raising his hand.
All right. Go ahead, Joshua.
Out in Surprise on the outskirts, we're one of the cities that obviously have an abundance of land for the build out model versus the build up model. And we're seeing that come through. And what we're seeing an abundance of, if it's not a full master plan community, the developers that are taking down 20, 30 acre chunks of land, anything basically under 100 acres worth of a chunk of land, they're looking at the 35 to 45 foot wide lot model. And we're seeing that a lot. So from a logistics standpoint, we work with our public works department to try to understand what the logistics of that would be, fire, medical, to be able to maneuver through those narrow lot subdivisions. But just from what you were asking about, what are you seeing in the development community? With the exception of master plan communities, that's what we're seeing when they're taking down just pieces of chunks of land. They're looking at 35 to 45 foot wide lots. And they're claiming that it is specifically to the housing product that they can put on there, because their argument is related to the linear cost per foot for infrastructure. So they want the block lengths more jam-packed, not necessarily more homes on the subdivision, but more homes on the individual block because of the infrastructure cost per linear foot.
Yeah, that makes sense. I talked to Lloyd and he mentioned that as well as one of the big things you guys are seeing. And that's for traditional single family ownership, correct?
That's correct. And then from a model of multifamily, what we're seeing is the detached apartment model. Cottages, Christopher Todd, Hancock Communities, those are the builders that are out there, but it's that detached model where instead of a courtyard based multiple unit building that's 2 or 3 stories on top of each other, they look like single family homes, but the complex interacts like an apartment complex. So kind of calling it a detached apartment model.
Yeah, I'm hearing that from pretty much everybody is seeing that what we're calling single family rental, or everybody's got their own name for it. We should probably figure out what to call that.
We call it the bungalows.
Bungalows.
Detached apartments is our model.
Yeah, that it's getting more and more popular across the region. Anybody else have anything they can think of that would be helpful? Okay. Well, like I said, this is a conversation we're going to definitely be needing to have over the next couple of years. And I realize it's still pretty early because pandemic's not even over yet, but we do want to hear from you, the practitioners, the people who are directly talking to the developers and get the land use requests and stuff like that. So we'll be bringing that up. Rudy, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, if anything, Scott, the only thing that I can mention is that since the pandemic, Maricopa hasn't really seen a slowdown. It's actually been interesting. We've just been seeing an upsurge in resident development. It's either shown that, working, telecommuting or working through Zoom or working through plan reviews, we've been actually more efficient to get things turned around a lot quicker. And working with developers, being that Maricopa is such an outskirt city, having the Zoom availability has actually, made our work a little bit more efficient. And working with developers, so they're coming left and right in the upsurge over the past year or so. So we really haven't seen a downturn or a slowdown in terms of housing development, if anything, it's just been an upsurge over the past 12 months.
Thanks, Rudy. I actually have heard that from, I think pretty much everybody said that they haven't seen a slowdown like you'd think, that
Right.
stuff was entitled and it was ready, and it was started a year ago, and maybe there'll be a slowdown a little, for a brief period when things kind of catch up, but then I wouldn't expect that for it to be very long.
Yeah. No, the other thing too, again, is material costs. Obviously, the material cost has gone up. The time frame to build a house is definitely extended from the typical days of 9 months to now about a year out to build a house, and shortage of labor has always been a constant issue over the past 12 months here.
Yeah, that was a problem even before the pandemic, especially the shortage of labor. That's what I kept hearing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We will close item 6 and move on to item 7, data analytics update. We have 3 items under that, A, B, and C. We'll start with 7A, movers data.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Let me share my screen. Okay, I'm going to assume that everybody can see this. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the PopTac. My name is Jesse Ayers. I'm the Socioeconomic Modeling Program Manager here in the Regional Analytics Division. Today, I'm going to talk about some household migration. This kind of fits in with some of the discussion we just had with nobody really slowing down. So this will cover the period between pre-pandemic from June 19 to the end of 2020. First, I'll start by talking about the data source. So this is new movers data from Data Axle. Data Axle is a company, I don't know if they were acquired or what, but they used to be called Info Group or Info USA. Now they're called Data Axle, so you may have heard of them before. This is a unique data set that they've put together of address level household move data. So the address they came from and the address they moved to. We purchased this data set, like I said, for about a 1.5-year time period, June 19 to the end of 2020. And so we chose our MSA, Maricopa and Pinal counties, as the area of interest, which makes sense. So we will get, this data set has moves that come into the MSA, that leave the MSA, and within the MSA. So we will capture moves of people moving from Gilbert to Goodyear. We wouldn't capture somebody moving from Tucson to Tombstone. That's just not in there. So it has to relate to the MSA in some way. They did not source this from Postal Service records. This is sourced from many different things. Utility records, they're going to the credit agencies and credit cards. People are pretty good about changing their addresses, or they are good about hunting you down. So they found this to be a really reliable source of address data. They also use utility records, I think I mentioned that, and various other public data to source this. And there's the link to it, which we'll get. There are a few caveats with this data. The demographic data that come along with them are lacking. So we know, that there was a household move that occurred, but we don't know a heck of a lot about who they were or even how many people there were. As you're seeing here, about 14.5% of moves, they just don't have an original location. So I pretty much tossed those out of the analysis since we don't know exactly where they came from. Oddly, 8.4% of incoming moves go to non-residential addresses. This is kind of an oddity that I haven't figured out yet. New developments sometimes have geocoding issues. So when there's a new development and there's new addresses, sometimes they just tie them all to like one central point within the development. So it'll make kind of an odd looking concentration. I think it just has to do with timing in terms of when the addresses are geocodable in their world. And one more thing on the demographic data that are lacking, they do provide some fields like the number of kids, but it just doesn't seem plausible to me that 85% of household moves into the region have 0 kids. That just doesn't seem quite right to me. So some things to look into, especially on the demographic data side. But nonetheless, there's a lot to dig into here. So a few numbers right off the top: 225,000 moves into the MSA, 109,000 out. So almost double coming in that are leaving, and you'll see that pretty consistently. And then, of course, the moves within the MSA actually are more than, or almost that same amount combined, which is pretty interesting. Lots of people moving within the region. We were able to tie 65% of people to single family addresses and 25.9 to multifamily addresses. This does not add up to 100% because of that 8% or so that goes to non-residential addresses. So that's why it's not 100. These are the household moves to and from the MSA by month, going back to June 19. The blue bars are the incoming moves, and the orange bars are the outgoing moves. And it's pretty clear that incoming outpaces outgoing across the board, almost double every single time, sometimes significantly more than double. Here's where the pandemic occurred, like in mid-March. So this was kind of a low point, but things shot right back up in April. And when we start comparing June to June and July to July, it's down a little bit, but certainly continuing to recover back to levels that we've seen in the past, despite the pandemic. So where are people moving to? Well, basically everywhere in the region. There's some hot spots, as you can see. Some are hotter than others, but it's pretty much across the board. People are moving everywhere. I have a few more slides to show you here about specifically where. So we've broken down the region into some different sub-regions. So this is often one we use, the East West Central Pinal designation. So in this one, East definitely is taking in more than Central or West, and Pinal, of course. When we break this down one level further into some more subregions, where we break out the Northeast and the Southeast, when you break those two apart, suddenly the Central wins. It's just that the Northeast and Southeast combined are bigger than everybody else. And this is where people are going to, not terribly surprising here. This is the top 16. It was just convenient to put on the page here, honestly. Phoenix, Scottsdale, Mesa, pretty much the usual suspects all the way down. So we're accounting for most of the moves here, but there are more cities. And now let's look at the other side, and where are all these folks coming from? Well, again, this is a map showing that the purple areas are real hotspots. So that's where I did sort of a heat map look, and all the little yellow dots are the actual move locations. So they're definitely coming from all over the country. I did not include Alaska and Hawaii here, but they're coming from there too. It just doesn't matter. They just keep on coming. And there's another interesting way to look at these data, I thought. And that would be a histogram of how far away are people moving from. So what this shows is the number of moves up the left and the miles as the crow fly miles down on the x-axis. And what you can see is there's these clusters around. This is around 100 miles away. This is around 300 miles away. So these correspond to city or metro areas. And I just went through and kind of tried to see where they were from. And this is just another view on the data. So 3,000 miles away, people in Hawaii, and lots of folks from Tucson across the board. And the top incoming states, again, this is no surprise. California, Texas, Illinois, Washington, Colorado are the big ones. That's where they're coming from. Over on the right-hand side here, this is a little bit different. This chart, this is showing people that moved into the MSA from Arizona. So which counties are they coming from in Arizona? And not surprising, Tucson at the top, Yavapai and Coconino coming down. And so that's where people are moving into the region from places in Arizona. That's their old county and the percentages. And so Intra-regional movers, this is something that we're going to be making really good use of these data. This is going to be used to specify a relocation model in AZSmart, which we don't currently have. We have one, but it's very rudimentary. So we're going to use this. Step one is how many and how far, and that's what we're showing here. So it's interesting, people that are moving within the region, vast majority of them stay within 10 miles or so. And we can use this curve to sample properties for location choices. And then 2+, we can tie more of these data down to other areas so we know whether they're going to rent, they're moving from, say, an apartment to a single family home. We might be able to make some assumptions about whether they purchased if we have a transaction for that. So there's, I think, some further things we can do here too in our model. And that is it. We're going to continue to work with this. We have a lot of different things we can look at it with, and we'd be happy to try to answer some of your questions with this too. I think that's all I have today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation.
Sure.
Are there any questions?
Jesse, this is Taylor Reynolds.
Hi, Taylor.
I was curious, where you were saying 8% were moving to non-residential, could senior living facilities account for that or not?
No, possibly some, but I saw an address of somebody moved to the local Benihana. So it's a little,
okay.
There's some oddities in there that I don't quite understand where they came from. So something we need to take up with Data Axle.
Sure, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, very good. Anyone else?
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, we'll move on now to agenda item 7B, Census American Community Survey comparison.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the PopTech Committee. I'm happy to be here with you today. My name is Debbie Brown, and I'm a GIS analyst here at MAG, and I work with census data a lot. So I'm happy to be able to share with you some of the analysis that we did with the census information. Let me share my screen with you. Just to confirm, are you seeing my screen there?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
All right, great. Like I said, I do a lot of work with census data, and I recently did some analysis on demographic trends. Let's see if we can get that to change. And as some of you may know, we now have 2 non-overlapping ACS 5-year data sets that we can compare. And this gives us the opportunity to look at major trends and changes. So we're using these data to compare changes within our member agencies, our region and the state, and also what is happening across the country. Please do note that this particular analysis does not include the unincorporated Maricopa and Pinal County areas. And also this obviously does not include any impacts from COVID-19. These are just some large scale changes that were already taking place. The 5 areas that we looked at are listed on the right, and we'll go through them now. Not necessarily in that order though. Okay, so one of the first things we looked at was population growth, and an interesting thing that we saw when comparing population was that the Phoenix MSA had a growth rate that was almost 3 times that of the US. As you can see from the table in the bottom row, we have the percent change in the bottom row here, and the MSA's growth rate was 9.8% compared to only 3.4% for the US. And also notable is that Arizona's growth rate is more than 2 times that of the US. And compared to other states, Arizona is ranked 14th in total population size, but it had the 6th highest growth rate. Something else interesting that we saw was that when just looking at the growth rate, there were 15 agencies within the region that had a growth rate that was higher than the MSA as a whole. We listed just the top 10 of them here on the right. And you can see that some of them are growing at a much higher rate than the MSA, especially Queen Creek at the top there with 51%. So that's just a quick summary of population growth in the region. Now, something quite notable that we found when comparing median age was that the MSA is younger than the US, but it's aging faster. You can see here in this table, in 2019, the MSA is younger than both the state and the US. It was 36.7 compared to 37.7 for the state and 38.1 for the US. So the state is also lower than the US, and Arizona actually ranks as the 14th youngest state. But if you look here at the difference between 2014 and 2019, you can see that the MSA aged by 1.3 years compared to only 0.7 years for the US. So next we wanted to understand why there was a notable difference in the median age between the 2 years. And in order to do that, we took a closer look at the changes in 3 different age groups. This table on the left here is just carried over from the previous slide, so we could still see that overall the population growth rate for the MSA was 9.8%. And here on the right, you can see that the growth rate for the under 18s was only 3.1%. The 18 to 64 range grew at a very similar rate to the MSA at 9%. Meanwhile, the 65 and up age group grew by a whopping 26%. And now that was the percent change or the growth rate for each group. But over here, within each group, you can see that the difference in share of the population, so the percent of the population that's under 18 is 26% here and 24%. So the under 18s declined by 2%. The 18 to 64-year-old group maintained the same 61% share of the population, and the 65 and up group increased by 2%. So that declining share for the under 18s, along with the increase in share of the 65 and up age group, kind of explains why the median age is increasing. Looking at median age at a more micro scale, as I said before, although the region is aging, it is still pretty young, and there are 18 agencies within the MSA that are younger than the median for the MSA. We have the top 10 youngest listed in this table here on the left. And you would expect Tempe, being a university town, that would have a younger median age than the MSA, but it is interesting that other cities, like Tolleson and Avondale and El Mirage, for example, have that younger population as well. So it's not just the university town. Okay, moving on to diversity. If you look here in this table, we have the total minority population as well as the percent minority population. And as you can see, the MSA and the state were both 45% in 2019, while the US is only 39%, so that's 6% higher. But not only does the MSA have a higher percent minority population, it also grew 7% faster than the US. You can see here the MSA had a percent change of 16% compared to only 9% for the US. I would like to also point out that the MSA went from having 11 agencies with a minority majority in 2014 to now having 14 minority majority agencies in 2019. And compared to other states, Arizona ranked as the 9th highest in percent minority. Okay, moving on to education. So when it comes to the percent share of the population that have a bachelor's degree or higher, the MSA is practically tied with the US. You can see here in the table in 2019, the percent of the population that was aged 25 and older that had a degree, it's the same, it's 32%, and it's the same for the MSA and the United States. Of course, these shares are rounded, so they aren't exactly the same, but the difference is less than 1%. But the MSA's growth rate of those with a degree is much better than the US. And you can see here that the MSA had a percent change of 23% versus the US at 16%. So that's 7% higher than the US. Arizona also has a percent change higher than the US as well. And compared to other states, even though it's ranked 31st as far as share of the population, it is ranked 10th in terms of percent change. And so Arizona made the top 10. Okay, we'll be wrapping up things with a quick look at poverty in our region. So another positive thing that we saw was that the percent of the population below poverty has declined substantially. If we look up here and compare the poverty rate in 2014 versus 2019, you can see that the MSA's poverty rate, sorry, my computer froze up a little bit. The poverty rate has declined was 1.5% higher than the US in 2014. And now it's only, the difference between these poverty rates is 0.3%. So we're 0.3% higher, which is a pretty small difference. If I rounded these, it would look like a 1% difference, but it's actually only a 0.3% difference. And you can see right here that the MSA declined by a rate of 11.9%, which is faster than the US. So although we do still have a higher poverty rate than the US, it's only ever so slightly higher, and we are quickly closing that gap. On a more micro scale, we saw 22 agencies that had a decline in the total number of people below poverty. So the number of people in poverty went down even while the population itself is growing. We also saw that there were 18 agencies that had a rate of decline higher than the MSA's 11.9% decline. And in fact, those 18 that were higher were actually, they actually had a rate higher than 14%, a decline higher than 14%. And of those 18, we went ahead and listed just the top 10 here in this table right here. And you can see that everyone in this top 10 saw a rate of decline higher than 20%. That's nearly twice the rate of decline as the MSA as a whole. Okay, so for now, that concludes my analysis in this presentation. I do realize that this was a very brief overview of the different things that we could look at as far as demographic trends and change. And with that being said, if you want to explore more of the census data, here are some of the tools that we have that you can look at and that have already been presented to you in the past. But I also wanted to mention that we are working on adding this information to our interactive map and creating some sort of online tool or dashboard where you can explore these data further as well as download it. For now, however, the data I presented to you today are available in a spreadsheet format. If anybody wants it, I can share that with you. With that, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the PopTech for your time today, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this point. Or Annabelle or Peter Burnett could also jump in and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for that. Are there questions? Okay, seeing no hands and hearing no questions. I appreciate the presentation. Very well done. Thank you. And we will move on now to agenda item 7C, Employment and Travel Reduction Program Data Update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, everyone. My name is Christian Gort. I'm the lead on the employer database here at MAG. Let me share my screen. I'm going to give us just a quick update on where we stand with the employer database. I don't have any fun maps or analysis to show you. Sorry. Get over here. So quickly with the TRP updates, for the new 2020 TRP data, we have processed that and we've updated that in the database. And we wanted to look at how the pandemic may be affecting employment. And we might not be seeing that in our data, most likely till next year. As you can see, only about 10% of the survey dates from TRP were, this is after March, but either in March or later. So most of the survey dates came prior to the pandemic. However, we did notice some drops from those surveys after March 1st that were likely COVID related. For example, Best Buy, they were surveying last year with an average employment of 82, and with the new data, it came in at 36. And through some online research, we did confirm that Best Buy had furloughed tens of thousands of employees. Obviously, their stores were closed for a short period of time. So we've been going through some of our own estimates to try to gauge how short-term these drops were, how many employees might actually have been laid off, and how many might have come back when the stores open. So we've been doing some averaging, not necessarily taking these full losses, but also knowing that the full employment's not quite back yet. Other examples that don't necessarily show any COVID effects, Bash's, for example, was open the whole time, so we didn't expect to see any changes. And these examples are for companies that were surveyed after March. Nordstrom was surveyed in mid-March. That didn't show too much change, which is kind of surprising because they should have had some time to where they were closed. Walmart was one that was surveyed after March. A bit later, they were surveyed in August. They had a very large increase, which also is not too surprising since things were getting pretty busy. But we expect to see more changes in the next year's TRP data, again, since the surveys would have shown up more after more surveys would have shown up after the pandemic started. Just want to give you a quick update on that. As far as the employment database in general, again, we'll be sending out the data review process when we're ready, when we're done with all the updates and ready for the QC process. We expect that to be late spring, early March. We are getting into the big meat of the updates, which comes from Dun & Bradstreet. The data review that we'll be sending back to you will be the same as we did last year. We're going to have a separate tab that's going to be limited to the high priority questions we have. And these are limited to large changes that we are having trouble answering with online research. Mostly large employment changes in either direction. Sometimes it's open, closed too. So those will be coming to you like they did last year. And these changes, we like to highlight these because, like I said, we have trouble answering the questions on our own through online research, but you also have very good local knowledge that we want to rely on. And with the pandemic, I expect these questions to be, or these lists to be slightly larger. Again, they're not very large lists if you remember from last year. Some agencies didn't receive any at all. Some had very, very, very few. So I expect those lists to be slightly longer. Again, we will send you the whole thing to review, but these are the ones that we highlight that we really need the largest help on. And with review, I want to remind you that our developers have now added a element to the employer database, which now allows edits to be requested at any time. If anybody's unaware of this or needs help, we're happy to do a one-on-one demo and show you how to do these edits. Lastly, a big thing now with the pandemic that we want to think about and open future discussion for is how the future landscape is changing for employment, how this might affect the employer database, how we collect our data, how we analyze it, how we're able to even visualize the data as well. So with that, we want to just put in everybody's in everyone's head just to kind of think about it and think about possible data sources and how we can find work from home employment, how this might change your needs, use cases, and we have to think about how it's going to change the way we are able to collect the data and build a database. So with that, I just want to thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Are there questions? Okay. Hearing none. Appreciate the presentation. And we will close that item and move to agenda item number 8, which is to announce that currently our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, April 27th, 2021 at 10 a.m.
Mr. Chair, if I can take a moment, wanted to introduce a new staff member.
Oh, absolutely.
Joe Marella, I think she's on, is a new GIS intern. Joe, if you want to say hi. She has a degree in anthropology and has actually written a children's book about anthropology. So those of you with children, that's probably one you don't have. And she's currently studying GIS and working for Jason over in the GIS shop. And we also wanted to mention, I don't think he's on today, but Alex Garza has been a GIS intern with us for a while now, a couple of years now, and he was just hired full-time as a GIS tech, also on Jason's team. So there's Joe. Joe, just turn her camera on. You want to say hi?
Hi, everyone.
Thanks, Joe. So welcome, Joe, and we'll have Alex at a future meeting, and you can all see what he looks like. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's great. Welcome, and thank you for those introductions. Again, next meeting for Tuesday, April 27th at 10. If that should change, I know that staff will send out an announcement. And seeing as we have gotten to the end of our agenda, the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks,